My name is Cryangel, and today I'm gonna be teaching y'all how to make chords. Alright, so instead of teaching y'all like super basic theory and like by the books and whatnot, I'm just gonna teach y'all how I make chords. I developed this little method after studying theory for many years. And this is just kind of how I make chords. So I have it split into the basics, intermediate things, advanced things, and then also like miscellaneous tips you can throw in whenever. And this is more like a toolkit. These are all things you can combine and mix and match and put everything together to create like super unique chords instead of just doing your basic minor, sevenths, major ninths and whatnot. But we'll get to the end. Let's start with the basics as I labeled them, and we're just gonna go off rip. So we're gonna start with like our basic triads. A prerequisite is that you're using scale highlighting. If you don't know how to do that, you click here in the piano roll, go to view, go to scale highlighting, and you're either gonna select major Ionian or minor natural Aeolian, either major or minor, and then any of these root notes. Like it doesn't matter. People will say like C major type beat or whatever. That shit doesn't matter, bro. So just pick anything. For simplicity, we're gonna be in C major. All right, so we're gonna start with the most basic stuff. How do you make a chord? So you place a note down, you skip a note that's in the scale, which would be the lighter color, and you place another note. This is technically what's called an interval, but that's like theory shit, and honestly, it's not really super important. But if you keep going, you go skip a note and then place another one, you get what's called a triad, and this is what chord is. So you have major and minor chords. How you can distinguish those is where the bigger gap of the two is. As you can see here, the bigger gap of the two is on the bottom. And what I mean is that, look, you have 3 notes in between these two, and then 2 notes in between these two. If there's a 3 gap here and then a 2 gap there, that's what's called a major triad or a major chord. Major is going to sound a lot more happier than minor. I have this chord here, and if you notice, between this note and this one, there's only 2, but between this one and this one, there's 3. Because the bigger gap is on the top, makes it a minor triad. Sounds a lot sadder. That is the most basic chords, right? You probably already know that. I'm just going over the basics. You'll also probably know this. Sevenths. You just get that by skipping a note and then placing another one. Sevenths. Ninths. How do you get that one? Skip a note, place one. Ninths. Might be wondering, where do you get those names from? Look, this is our 7th chord, our major 7th, because there's a 3 gap at the bottom. How do we get the 7th? So look, when you copy this note over and you start counting up notes in the scale, watch what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's how you get 7ths. 9th is the same. Copy over the bass note, start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Boom. 9ths. I'm also just gonna go over adds as well because it's a very similar concept. You have this one, right? Remember, this is the major triad because there is a 3 gap here. Major, so it sounds more happy. What happens if you just add a note on top of it? What instead of like instead of going skip note, making it a major 7th, what if you just went note right there? That's what's called a 6th chord. And technically that's just like an addition on to your major chord. Your major triad, you're adding a 6th. Where does the 6 come from? Let's copy over this note. Start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then let's add an 8th, which is also just the note up an octave. And then maybe an 11th or a 13th, right? Like you can just keep adding and adding and adding. And now you just have this really complex and interesting chord. And then the last thing I'm gonna go over in the basics is scale degrees. So if you remember, when we go to view and scale highlighting, we picked our scale. What is a scale? The scale is basically just all the notes that are in the key. How do you get a scale? You start from the root note, which is these notes here, whatever you picked, you click it in. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Scale degrees are basically like what number that note is in the scale. So in C major, E is the third scale degree, the third note in the scale. See? 1, starting on C, 1, 2, 3, we get to E. A is the sixth one, because if we start on C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is important to know because like sometimes you'll find chord progressions online and they'll be in like Roman numerals, right? Very popular one for like anime music is the 4-5-3-6, which is often called like the golden road progression. Like if you saw 4-5-3-6, you might not know what that is, but that means you take the fourth note in the scale, which is F. See 1, 2, 3, 4, F. You build a chord. You take the 5, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the G. Build a chord. The 3, 1, 2, 3, build a chord, and so on and so forth, right? The sixth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the A. And then bam, like now you just have a chord progression. Like it's pretty basic, but now it's on you. Like, oh, you can add a seventh, add a sixth. Why not add an eighth by just layering this up an octave, right? And now you have like your own chord progression. Another one I like to use a lot is the 4-5-6-3 progression. That one's pretty cool. Like this, I'm not gonna build the chords out, but this one's one I use a lot. And yeah, just look up chord progressions online. A very popular R&B one is the 2-5-1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a very popular one in R&B. But yeah, scale degrees are pretty important to know. Sometimes you can use them if you're feeling a little bit uninspired. And then the last basic one would be like chord rhythms. And this is just basically like when the chords play. So like say you have C major 7 into this. This is, you're gonna notice here, like if you start this interval here and you do skip note, you get what's called a tritone, which is where there is no 3 gap. And this has a little bit more dissonance to it. Do you hear how that's not as like, not as happy as a major? Not as sad as a minor? It just sounds a little off. That's something important to know. If you're not doing that intentionally, what you can do is you can just move a note down like that and then just keep building your chord. So now you just have a different vibe that isn't dissonant. But yeah, just something random to throw in. But chord rhythms is where like you change up the rhythm of the chords. Very popular one in PLUGGNB is the 3 to the 5, which basically is like this one plays for 1, 2, 3 beats, and then this one plays for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beats. That's a very popular one. Another popular one is the 5-3, which is just inverted. And then another popular one for plug is like this at the yeah, I think it's usually on like the 5th bar, where it has each note has 2 beats in it. And then for me, the one I use the most is just this, bro. You'll probably see this a lot in my beats. Like I literally just have it go for 8 beats or 2 bars. It has a lot more room to create your own melodies out of it. Okay, moving on to the intermediate. Intermediate is a little bit more advanced. Um, Not really, but just a little bit. And remember that this can be used in addition to the basics. The basics can add on to the intermediate, and the intermediate can add on to the basics. These ones just require a little bit more knowledge to know like when to use it, when not to use it. So the first thing in the intermediates I'm going to talk about are suspended chords. So look, if we come back here with our major triad, C major, refresher, how do we know it's C major? Because there's a 3 gap right here. We can make it suspended by taking the third. Where's the third come? Start here, 1, 2, 3. The third note, and either moving it up or moving it down by 1 note that is in the scale. So look, we take this E and we drop it by 1 note in the scale, which moves it to D. This makes it a suspended second chord. Second obviously coming from taking the root note, counting up, 1, 2, where like it's on the same pitch, right? Second, suspended second. This is what it sounds like. It has a more like emotionally ambiguous tone compared to your standard major, minor, tritone, triad, whatever, right? Same with the suspended fourth, which comes from just moving it up 1 note. Also has a more ambiguous tone. That one's pretty important. And this isn't necessarily like very theory correct, but say you have like this major 9th chord, you can just start moving notes around, bro. Like you can take this one, move it down to like it is a suspended chord, right? Like say you had treating it like you had this chord, right? This chord right here, and you're just moving this chord's third down, making this a suspended second. So when you do that in this chord, it has a different vibe compared to what it would sound like otherwise, right? You can just throw it around, start moving notes around, see what you sounds good. That's just a technique you can do. Oh, you could even move it up 1. Next one is diminished and augmented chords. I'm gonna say augmented with a huge asterisk here because this is not at all what augmented is. But for our purposes, it's pretty much like, right, it's pretty much augmented. So diminished, if you remember, I said that this is a tritone because you can notice that there's only 2 here and 2 here. You hear how tense that sounds? Now, what if we just kept going with this pattern where we kept adding 2 and adding 1, skipping 2 and adding 1, skipping 2, adding 1. Now we get this one where there is no 3 gap anywhere and it has this really tense tone. That is absolutely perfect for like the end of your phrase, or as what's called a passing chord, which basically is just a chord that is in between 2 chords. That's usually shorter. But it's perfect for like the end of a pattern, right? Let me make a quick little. I just made a quick little progression here. Super basic. As you can tell, major 7th, major triad, and then I added the 6th, which made it a major 6 chord. This one is a minor 7th, and then I added that super dissonant chord at the end here. Listen. Do you hear how like tense that made it seem? But when it played this chord here, it was perfect. Like it just loops it together so well. Like that. And then augmented chords are a little bit more situational. What an augmented chord technically is where you raise a note by 1/2 step, whether that puts it in the scale or not. But like that's not really necessary for our purposes. What I'm going to be calling an augmented chord is kind of similar to how I call this is diminished because there's only 2 steps, or there's 2 steps between everything. What I'm calling an augmented chord is when there's 3 steps between everything. All right, a really good example of an augmented chord is One Way 3 by Otto and produced by CeeLo. This is just like a super simplified version of the MIDI. This is just kind of what I could replicate off the dome. There is no like actual like melody or MIDI to it, but these are just the chords behind it. This is the augmented chord. That's a really good usage of that augmented chord. It has a very different feel. It's as if this were a diminished chord, which would be something like this. Like diminished chord seems a lot more tense, and the augmented chord seems a lot more like, I don't even know how to put it, more off. This is something you got to experiment and use your ear a lot to where you should use it or not. All right, moving back to C major from C sharp minor, we're just gonna go through the rest of these intermediates because they're pretty simple. Next one would be layering up an octave, which is just pretty simple. What basically what you do, just shift and left click, command up arrow, bam, layered it up an octave. This G and also like just moving it up an octave as well. Like what if I don't like this G here? Command up arrow. Bam, now it's up an octave. You could also do the same in reverse, moving and layering things down an octave. What if we have, I don't know, A minor chord here? Take this C, like move it down an octave. Take this E, copy it down an octave. Right, those are just like tools you can use. Like you can just use it and experiment with if it sounds good or not. And the best thing about this is like, bro, you can just delete it and then move it back. Like, oh, I didn't like that E how it sounded there. I can just delete it. Or if I don't want the C down an octave, I can just put it back, right? Like that's the best thing about these tools and these techniques you can use is just you can mix and match them. Next one would be wide spacing, and basically all that means is just instead of going skip note, why not just skip note, right? Has a completely different vibe. Usually I like to do this at the top and bottom of my chords, so like C major 7, pretty basic. Skip 2 notes, place one. Skip 2 notes, place one. Skip 2 notes that are in the scale. Let me preface that. Now I have a really wide chord. And like it would sound like this if I didn't do that. Which is cool, but it's a lot more basic. And then the last thing would be half steps. Y'all probably already know half steps, but it has like a pretty dissonant and almost like evil quality to it if you use it a certain way. Like that. Like a lot of rage beats use that interval. But yeah, using half steps when making your chords, let me just write like a quick example here. Like this chord progression from this E minor 7th to this D minor 7. It's basic, but there's some soul to it. And where's that soul come from? It comes from this half step and then this half step. Shoot, let's go back and apply some of the tips. Like making this one, just moving it up a half step, right? Like treating it like it was this chord and then making a suspended fourth, right? Move it up a half step and I don't know, move this one down a half step, which basically just makes this a minor 6th. Right, like this is a super basic chord, bro. Like this is just minor 6th chord, which is minor chord with, instead of like doing skip note, you just move it there. Like now it has a lot more soul and it has a lot more attention and it has a lot more like emotion to this progression just by just like mixing, matching those tips. All right, so those are all the intermediate ones. Now we're going to move on to the advanced ones, which there are only two, but these are kind of important. The first one's important. The second one is just like, the first one's pretty important. The second one is a little bit more situational, but still pretty good. I use it personally all the time. The first advanced one is just building chords from the top down. Start again from our C major 7th chord, right? We listen to this one. In my head, I hear this B, go to this D, right? I hear this interval. Let's just start building chords from the top down, right? Let's go skip note, skip note, skip note, and then let's do a wider spacing. Let's skip 2 and then put that one there. Let's see what this sounds like. And then let's treat this like it's its own chord and then make it a suspended second. Like so. Right? And like now I already have a pretty good spot to go on from and then make more music on. And then the final one The final tip, like I said, it's a little bit more situational, but it is pedal tones. Pedal tones are pretty important. Basically, what a pedal tone is, it's when there's multiple chords in a row that have the same note, right? Like looking at first glance, these G's and E's are both included in both chords, right? So if we wanted, we could just keep going, keep making chords about this. What if we want to keep this G here? And then, I don't know, do that, make it an augmented chord, right? But look, this G is repeated throughout the entire time. And it often helps if you layer this up an octave. It ties all the chords together, if that makes sense. Maybe we don't like how that is. Maybe we move it down. Right, but it ties all the chords together. And this is like something I use in all of my midis. You can go through all of my TikToks, pretty much like the 2 cookups I have on this channel. You can go through all of them and you'll see that I use pedal tones all the time because it creates a very nostalgic, very melancholic, very emotional feeling to your chord progressions. All right, so this is kind of a last minute addition, but the actual last one is going to be what I'm going to be calling R&B chord voicings. And this is something I've been experimenting with a lot recently. And this is kind of just something that combines all the tips that I've showcased today. And basically, it's like, okay, let's start with our, bring back this, right? Our C major 7th chord. But let's drop it down here. Keep building it up while doing the note skip note. But whenever you come across this thing here, you place that one and then just keep going. And then you get rid of, at the bottom here, you get rid of the 3rd. And then you get this super massive chord stack. And this is just really, honestly, it's just really beautiful. What it is just basically just adds and wide spacings and then just moving stuff up and down an octave, right? Like layering stuff up and down an octave more specifically. You can see that this right here is just a complete copy of this. Yeah, honestly, I just found out about this and I've been experimenting with it a lot after recording the main part of this video. So I don't know the absolute intricacies of it, but you know, feel free to experiment and take this and apply other tips with it as well. Like, oh, what if you wanted to, I don't know, make this a suspended second or layer this one up an octave, right? Now you have this really huge and interesting chord. All right, the last ones I'm just gonna go over pretty quickly. They're just miscellaneous stuff. The first one I call like the Goyxrd method because I've seen this in a couple of his beats I've heard. Basically you have a minor 7th. You take the 4th, which is the note in between these two, and you can also get there by moving this up by 1, the 3rd up by 1 in the scale, or counting up from the root note 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 4th is this G, putting it up an octave, and then taking the root and then putting it up 2 octaves. And then you get this chord here. Or you can take out the root. But that chord, I'm pretty sure the first thing that pops in my mind is Spin by Summers, which had like a TikTok about it go kind of viral recently. But like, yeah, that's a really simple chord you can just use and throw in and whatever. The last 3 are just like pretty simple chord progressions to get you started. This one I call the Xangang method. You got to be in a major key. So C major. Build yourself a major 7. Copy these 3 over, move them down by 1. And then from this note, go up 2 and then place 1. Has a very jazzy kind of R&B feel to it. I personally saw this one on like a live he did with Summers in like 2023. I found like an old ass screen recording of it. And he was like making a beat with Summers on IG and he had this in there, this chord progression. And then if you go through some of the Xangang samples, he also has a pretty classic. And no, it's just something you can add upon and something you can start with. Right. The next one is a little bit more unique. But basically, you create a major ninth, copy it over. You take this note, which is the third, and put it down by one semitone, not one note in the scale, but by one semitone, and it creates what's called a major or a minor major chord. You have a minor triad here, and you have a major triad here, so it creates a minor major chord. This little chord progression is heard sometimes in like Lucy Bedrock stuff. A lot of more like his what's that EP called? Fete Dave Vanille or something like that. It's heard sometimes in there. I honestly heard a lot from like type beats people were making about that stuff. So yeah, that one's really good. And then the last one also starts with a major seventh. And what you do is you just copy this over, and then you build up a minor sixth chord, regardless of if the notes are in the scale. What is a minor sixth chord? It's just a minor chord. Instead of going skip note and then making it a minor seventh like that, you just go note, get a minor sixth, and then this is how you get this progression, which is a perfect start. So yeah, that's basically how I make my chords, is by mixing and matching all these little tips and tricks and whatever, and then just moving notes around and creating my own unique chord. Like, that's what's so good about this, and this is why I'm teaching it this way, is because if I went literally by the books and I'm like, okay, you want to do major ninths, minor ninths here, and then you want to do this and that and whatever, it's just gonna box you in. And honestly, like for me, I can't be creative like that. I studied theory honestly since I was like 9 years old. So I pretty much know a lot about. I'm not gonna be boastful or anything. I'm not gonna talk myself up, but I do know a decent amount of theory, and it got to the point where that was holding me back. It was like, oh shit, I gotta stick with the major and minor ninths and whatever, right? But that limits you to a point. So it's a lot easier, have a faster workflow, and make more beats and make more unique beats if you just mix and match these tips that I'm giving you today. It's still important to go out and learn more, right? Like I learned about the major to minor major ninth chord. I've learned that shit from like Instagram. I learned the major seventh to minor sixth chord progression that I just told you about. Both of those two I learned from Instagram, right? So it's good to like take inspiration from other people as well, but also like put your own spin on it. And the last thing I want to do before I end this video is break down one of my midis using these tips. So I made this MIDI, shoot, like 3 months ago. I don't know if I ever posted it. This is like one of the only things I've saved, ironically. This is what it sounds like here. Okay, just by breaking it down, right? I mean, this is just like a top line, pretty simple. But the chords are what we are really after. So let me simplify this down just a little bit, make it a little easier to understand. So these are just the chords here. So if we just look at it off rip, we can start like piecing back to what the chords used to originally look like, right? Just by moving those two around. Actually, you know what might be off? I'll put this on the clap track so we can see what it originally looked like. So just by moving these two around, you can see, oh, this used to be a major, or sorry, a minor seventh chord, and that I layered this note up an octave, right? This D, I put it up an octave, and then I did some wide spacing here, added this note, and I just copied this C down 2 octaves, right? Just off rip. And I was like, oh shit, what if I treated this and then made a suspended second? And then what if I just moved this down, right? That's how I got this chord. This one is where the augmented stuff comes in, right? Like if you look at it, bam, that is an augmented chord. 3 gap, and then another 3 gap. And then you can piece together like, oh, this used to be here, and then I layered it down, and now that's this, and then I dropped this one by an octave, and I try to make this a pedal tone, so I copied it over. So this D plays from both these chords. And then like if you look at the whole progression, there's an E playing throughout it that ties everything together. And then I used half steps to make these two sound very like soulful. And then here, this is just standard minor ninth chord. This is standard major sixth chord. And I was like, oh, I wasn't feeling it, so I dropped it by a half step and then layered this down. And then this one is just a minor ninth chord. Then I was like, oh, fuck it, bro. Let's just copy this over, put it there. And then this is the same thing, but then I just moved these two up by one note in the octave. Or, sorry, one note in the scale. Right? Like, that's how you can mix and match these tips and then just create super unique and dense sounding chords and super, I don't know, very interesting sounding shit instead of just your standard stuff. Obviously, your standard stuff clearly has a place, right? Like this minor ninth fits right in, but it sounds good in the middle of an augmented chord and then a slightly modified major sixth. Sounds good right in the middle of it. Yeah, this video is long as shit. My bad. But this is something I'm very passionate about. Obviously, you can probably see my stance on music theory. I think it's important to know a little bit. Like, obviously, you needed to know a little bit of music theory to understand this video. But, yeah, like I've said, it gets to a point where it'll hold you back. Then you're learning shit like, I don't know, circle of fifths. When are you ever gonna, like, learn that? But that's one of the entry things to learn when it comes to music theory. But yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know, honestly, bro, if you have any suggestions at all. I'm probably gonna do another PLUGGNB breakdown, like of a full beat, and then maybe I'll do a drum tutorial because someone asked me to do that. Shout out Knox. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you all so much for the support. I'm gonna catch y'all later. Thank you for watching.